Have you ever stopped to wonder why a woman can describe with perfect clarity exactly what you are wearing the first time you met, down to the color and the fabric, while you genuinely cannot recall what you ate for lunch 2 days ago? This is not a quirk of personality, and it has nothing to do with who is paying closer attention. It is the result of deeply embedded neurological architecture that shapes how the female brain experiences the world. To truly grasp this, you need to understand something called the anticipation effect. Most of us assume the greatest emotional rush comes at the moment of arrival. The gift is unwrapped. The goal is achieved. The kiss finally happens. But snorts, the female brain does not follow that script. Research consistently shows that for women, the neurological response is often far stronger during the waiting period than at the moment the reward actually arrives. Dopamine, the brain's primary motivational chemical, tends to surge most powerfully during the buildup. The week of countdown before vacation, the hours of preparation before a special evening, even the silent, charged minutes spent watching a phone screen for a notification. The possibility, the not yet, carries more neurological weight than the moment of arrival. This means the journey is not simply the path toward the experience. For the female brain, the journey is the experience itself. A perfectly executed surprise or a slow, deliberate chase carries far more emotional resonance than the endpoint it leads to. Remove the buildup, and the payoff loses its meaning. Understanding this reveals something profound. Anticipation is not just pleasant, it is the engine of her engagement. Now, let's confront something that requires a bit of intellectual honesty. Women are statistically more vulnerable to what psychologists refer to as the illusory truth effect. And before anyone misreads that, this has zero relationship to intelligence or susceptibility to being fooled. It is purely about how the brain processes pattern recognition. When a particular narrative gets repeated consistently, whether it is a beauty standard, a piece of relationship advice, or a destructive piece of self-talk, the brain gradually stops subjecting it to scrutiny. Repetition becomes the brain's shorthand for certainty. What was once a claim becomes, through sheer repetition, an accepted fact. This is not a flaw. It is an evolutionary mechanism that historically helped humans absorb collective wisdom quickly, distinguishing what belonged from what threatened survival. In the modern world, however, this means the stories women absorb repeatedly from media, from their social environments, from the people closest to them, do not merely sit at the surface level. They sink in and restructure the internal framework through which a woman understands herself and the reality she moves through. Here is another dimension of the female brain that demands genuine respect. It is constructed for hyperempathy, and the engine behind it is a network of specialized brain cells known as mirror neurons. These neurons activate not only when a person performs an action themselves, but also when they simply observe someone else performing it. Everyone has them, but research shows that women operate with significantly more active mirror neuron systems. The practical result of this is extraordinary. When you are sitting across from a woman carrying anxiety, excitement, or stress, she's not simply observing those emotions in you. Her brain is internally recreating your emotional state within her own nervous system. This is what researchers call emotional contagion, and it explains why women so often function as the emotional backbone of social groups, sensing a shift in atmosphere before a single word has been exchanged. But this superpower carries a real cost. Toxic relationships, chronically negative environments, and high-conflict situations do not merely exhaust women emotionally. They are neurologically experienced as something the woman is living through herself, not watching from a safe distance. Her surroundings are not just a backdrop. They become the primary variable in her overall well-being. Consider this. The fastest way to make something dramatically more appealing to a woman is to tell her it is not available to her. And this is not about being contrary for the sake of it. This is a well-documented psychological force called psychological reactance. Think of it as the mind's built-in alarm system against any perceived threat to personal freedom. The instant a woman senses that her choices are being restricted or that someone is attempting to dictate her behavior, her brain launches a powerful motivational drive to reclaim that threatened autonomy. The forbidden thing does not just become more interesting. It becomes a symbol of her right to self-determination. The historical context here matters enormously because women have navigated centuries of social constraints, more restrictions placed on their choices, areas declared off limits. Their internal resistance to control has been honed into something exceptionally. The response is not mild irritation. It is a full biological mobilization to reassert independence. This is not stubbornness. It is a survival mechanism designed to protect autonomy. Recognizing this means understanding that genuine respect for her boundaries and choices is not simply good manners. It is the only language that does not activate that deep defensive response. There is a conversation that has been misframed for far too long, and it is time to reframe it properly. When a woman revisits something painful that happened years ago with the clarity of someone who just lived it, that is not stubbornness or an inability to move on. It is the result of a sophisticated biological process called emotional memory encoding. The female brain is remarkably efficient at attaching neurochemical markers to events that carry emotional significance. Ordinary, low-stakes memories, what you ate on a random weekday, what the weather was like last Thursday, get filed loosely and eventually fade. But any event wrapped in strong emotion, whether that is profound joy, fear, or a wound inflicted by someone she trusted, gets written into memory with extraordinary precision and durability. This was not an accident of evolution. For ancestral women, being able to retain detailed social information, knowing who was trustworthy, who posed a danger, who could be relied upon, was critical to protecting themselves and their communities. In the context of modern relationships, this manifests as an incredibly detailed internal record of every interaction that carried emotional weight. She is not holding a grudge. Her biology is doing exactly what it was designed to do, preserving the information that mattered. The memory strong, because the moment was significant. Understanding this shifts the entire frame of the conversation. The cultural mythology around women and multitasking has been repeated so often, it has taken on the feel of fact. And yet, the scientific reality quietly dismantles it. The human brain, regardless of gender, is neurologically incapable of genuinely processing two complex streams of information at the same moment. True simultaneous multitasking is not a skill any brain possesses. What women actually demonstrate is something different, and in many ways, more impressive. Rapid task switching. The female brain tends to be more adept at moving fluidly between competing demands with speed and relative ease, shifting from a professional responsibility to a domestic concern to a social obligation in the span of seconds can look from the outside like simultaneous processing. But here is the piece that almost never gets said out loud. Every single one of those transitions carries a cognitive cost. Each time the brain disengages from one mode and reloads for another, it draws down on mental energy. The switching is efficient, but it is never free. The cultural applause for women who can do it all at once, is not the compliment it sounds like. It is an expectation that ignores how the human brain genuinely functions and celebrates a high-speed drain of finite mental resources that leads inevitably to exhaustion. In the world of social influence, there is a principle so quietly powerful that most people never notice it operating in their own lives. It begins with a small, almost effortless request. Something so minor that refusing it would feel unnecessarily difficult. When a person agrees to that small ask, something subtle but significant shifts internally. She has not just completed a task. She has unconsciously begun to define herself as someone who helps, someone who shows up, someone who supports this kind of thing. And once that internal identity is established, something called cognitive dissonance makes declining a subsequent larger request feel uncomfortable. Walking away from the second ask would contradict the self-image that was quietly constructed by saying yes to the first. This is what researchers call the foot in the door effect, and it operates with particular strength in people who are socially conditioned to value helpfulness and cooperation. Understanding this principle from the inside is genuinely liberating. It allows women to recognize the moments when obligation is being engineered rather than earned, and to draw firmer for everyone else. It is a map of how small, consistent, positive exchanges build the kind of trust that sustains relationships over time. There is an entire silent language operating beneath every conversation, and for women, the most powerful dialect within it is eye contact. When meaningful, attentive eye contact occurs, the female brain releases oxytocin, the neurochemical most closely associated with bonding, trust, and emotional connection. That gaze communicates something no sentence can fully replicate. I see you. I am fully here with you, and you are safe with me. Because women tend to be more finely attuned to nonverbal signals than most, eye contact functions as the primary instrument for assessing the sincerity and safety of an interaction. It is the most direct neurological bridge between two people. But the line between a gaze that opens a connection and one that triggers a threat response is razor thin, entirely dependent on context, timing, and intent. Women are extraordinarily sensitive to this distinction. An unbroken stare in the wrong environment does not feel like deep attention. It registers as an attempt to dominate. The same quality of gaze that creates intimacy in a quiet, trusted setting can provoke a visceral sense of danger in an unfamiliar or public one. The eyes in female psychology do far more than see. They are constantly reading for safety, intent, and the nature of the interaction in real time. There is a psychological trap that has a particular grip on the emotional lives of women, and it is known as the sunk cost fallacy. It is the deeply human, deeply irrational conviction that we should continue investing in something because of what we have already put into it. When a woman has poured years of time, emotional energy, and genuine love into a relationship, a career, or a commitment, her psychology generates a powerful pull to keep going, even when the situation has become clearly harmful or hopeless. The internal voice that says, "I cannot leave now, not after everything I have already given," becomes its own form of captivity. The fear that walking away means every past effort becomes meaningless holds her in place long past the point where staying serves her. For women, this pull tends to be especially intense because of how deeply connection and loyalty are valued. Leaving can feel like personal failure. But the moment of true freedom arrives when she recognizes that sunk costs are precisely that. They are gone. No further investment can recover them. The only thing that remains within her control is the choice she makes right now for the person she is becoming. If there is a single principle worth carrying forward from everything explored here, it is this: emotions are the only currency in human connection that never devalues. We put enormous faith in logic, in well-constructed arguments, in the orderly sequence of events and facts. We believe that if we explain something clearly enough, if the evidence is solid, that is what will leave a mark. But the biological reality of the female brain does not work that way. A woman may forget your exact words. She may lose the thread of your reasoning. Over time, the specific details of what happened on a given day may blur or fade entirely. But she will carry, with perfect fidelity and for the rest of her life, the precise feeling of what it was like to be in your presence during those moments. That emotional imprint does not fade because it is stored at the neurological level. The brain's emotional center, the limbic system, is the gatekeeper of long-term memory. When a moment carries genuine warmth, safety, or respect, it gets encoded as a permanent reference point. When a moment carries dismissiveness, carelessness, or a breach of trust, that gets encoded with equal sharpness. The feeling is not attached to the memory. For the female brain, the feeling becomes the memory. It becomes the lens through which every future exchange is interpreted. This is why you cannot argue your way out of an emotional hurt, and why no gift or grand gesture can compensate for a consistent failure to be present. When the emotional frequency is wrong, the brain registers it as a fundamental problem, regardless of the surface-level effort. But when someone consistently makes a woman feel genuinely seen, safe, and valued, they are not just having a nice moment together. They are building something neurologically durable. Facts have a shelf life. Feelings become the foundation.